This is what East Palestine looks like on February 3rd, 2023. Destruction, flames, and toxic smoke filled the air as a Norfolk Southern train derailed. The train derailed because Class 1 railroads take a non-strategic, reactive approach to safety culture, responding to external pressures rather than embedding safety at their core.
And this is why it's more important than ever to go beyond the bottom line. We'd like to thank you, the Association of American Railroads, for being here today as we talk about how you can build a safety-first future for freight rail. We are Track Consulting. My name is Brenna Boer.
And I'm Palmer Moore.
And today, we'll be walking you through so that you can develop an understanding of the problem, how freight railroad companies can build a preventative culture, what you can do to support it, how you can implement it, and then finally, we'll walk through some key takeaways. So starting with understanding our problem, we have to know what you, the AAR, do in the industry. You are the trade union that represents North American railroad companies. Your purpose is to promote safety and efficiency within the industry. You do this by doing policymaking in Washington, D.C., setting standards, doing industry insights through a subsidiary, and then doing research and developing new technologies. And when we look at our key stakeholders, you are kind of the glue that ties them all together. We have our railroad companies that are in charge of everyday operations, Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3. And then we also have our railroad employees that are the boots on the ground. These are the people where if a derailment were to occur, their livelihood and well-being is on the line. And whenever talking to railroad employees, we also need to keep in mind that we have to communicate with employee unions. On behalf of these three stakeholders, you, the AAR, speak with regulators like the Federal Railroad Administration and the Surface Transportation Board to ensure that policy is actually helping the industry. If any line in this tree were to snap, ultimately a derailment could occur, and that could ultimately negatively impact local communities, which is not what we want. So now I'm going to pass things off to Palmer so he can go over proactive safety.
Thank you, Brenna. So when we look at the railroad industry, right now, there is a reactive culture. Companies take an issue that happens and work on solving that, but they don't look ahead to the future. So as we work towards proactive safety, we've broken it down into three areas. The first is technology, which railroad companies actually do a really good job with. In response to East Palestine, per year, companies spend an average of $23 billion on upgrading infrastructure and building new technologies. So they're really good on this quote of fixing the problem. But the issue with proactive is that there's two other components. There are people and process. For people, the value of safety is prioritized by Class 1 companies, but it doesn't go down through their value chain. Employees don't feel it in their day-to-day operations. Then, on the process side, there aren't great systems within these Class 1 railroad companies for individuals to report a close call incident that could prevent an issue from ever coming up. So while they do well in fixing the problem, what the industry is missing is noticing and addressing it before something like East Palestine happens in the first place. Now, as we look at the issue, in response to East Palestine, Congress asked the Federal Railroad Administration to conduct safety culture assessments on the major 6 Class 1 railroads here in the US. The first two, Canada National and Canada Pacific Kansas City, have not finished their surveys yet, but they're known in the industry to have pretty good safety cultures. Then we look at the 4 who have started and then 1 who hasn't finished their safety assessments. BNSF leads the pack at 3.5 out of 5 on a scale of 1 to 5, and then Norfolk Southern and CSX are at 3 out of 5. While these are above average, the goal on this matrix is for them to be closer to a 4.5 towards a 5, showing that there's still room for growth in the industry. Then, I want to touch on Union Pacific here, where they're marked with a DNF. This means did not finish. The FRA stopped their assessment because they found that company executives were curating answers for lower-level employees so that their results could be tainted and look better than what they actually are. And so this proves, when we put these numbers into context, that companies who have better safety cultures, those like CPKC, BNSF, and Canada National, they have less accidents per million miles, which factors in size. But then a company like Union Pacific, who's intentionally tampering with what's going on in their assessments, well, no shock, they're at the top of this list with the most accidents happening. And so why this is so important is that this shows that there are risks if culture doesn't change. Not only are you harming key stakeholders, but you can continue to have financial problems for your business. So now I'll pass it back to Brenna to talk about how we can actually build this culture of prevention within Class 1 railroads.
Thank you, Palmer. I want to tie it back to our 3-prong equation: people, process, and technology. Like we said, the industry is doing very well with the technology portion. After the East Palestine derailment, a lot of companies, especially Norfolk Southern, made sure that they were adding more hot wheel bearing detecting sensors, autonomous vehicles, things like that. But when we look at preventative culture as a whole, people and processes are still needed to improve. We need to make sure that employees are understanding what safety is and why it's important, and also that they have a process to report it. So going through, our solution is to set new culture standards, and this is a three-pronged solution. First, we'd like you to use the FRA's confidential close call reporting system. 2, create financial incentives for safety. And 3, conduct continual culture assessments. This is what we want the freight railroads companies to do, but ultimately we will go through how you can support this as the AAR. So first, jumping into the C3RS system, this is already in existence and it's run by the FRA. The way it works is employees submit a close call. What a close call incident is it's any breach in safety that could have caused accident or injury, but didn't necessarily. So if a rail car were to get away and run through a passenger intersection and it didn't hit anything, that doesn't need to be reported. Whereas if a car were in the way, that could have left an injury or death. So we want to make sure that the railroad companies are learning from this. So once employees submit that close call, it is classified by a neutral third party, and then the FRA and peer review team are able to address this issue and give a report to the railroad companies. And what we're doing here is ultimately creating a virtuous cycle. The way that it works is an employee reports a close call incident, and the FRA is able to give findings to a company. The company is then able to learn from this where before they wouldn't, and then create safer operations. Employees are now working in a safer environment and understand that their word means something, making them more likely to report again in the future, thus continuing this cycle. And the way that we know that this works is the aviation industry has been doing this since 1976. They have a confidential close call reporting system that is called things like lithium-ion batteries. If you ever go to the airport and they ask if you have any in your bag, that's because an employee found that they could catch fire. And instead of that catching fire in the passenger part of a plane, they made it so that it could only go in cargo. So that's an amazing example of how this virtuous cycle works in practice. Now I'm going to pass things off to Parminder to go through the second and third prongs of our solution.
So we understand in large organizations that what gets rewarded gets done and what gets punished gets avoided. So if we want safety to be the focus, we need to reward it. And that starts at the top by upping executive pay and linking it directly to safety. We want railroad companies to have their executives paid 20% of their compensation based on safety outcomes. We also recognize that you can start culture from the bottom up as well. And so we want to create a total reward program for our employees to make sure that they're thinking about safety day to day. So if they meet safety outcomes year over year, we want them to receive a 3% bonus of their pay to incentivize them to continue through this. Now, the third part is that we understand for organizations as well, what you want to manage, you need to be able to measure. And so if we're going to keep talking about culture and creating a change, it's not something that those of us in this room today can do one time and it solves the problem. It's a continual process. And so the industry needs to keep tracking what culture is and how it changes. We want companies to partner with a third party to measure culture and then publish these reports to hold them accountable both to investors as well as the industry more broadly. Now I'll pass it back to Brenna to talk about what you all, the AAR, can actually do to help influence this change.
Thank you, Palmer. So obviously, because you are the tie that keeps all stakeholders communicating with each other, you have a responsibility to realign the industry actions with these values. As we go forth, these cultural standards that we talked about in our three-pronged solution, we want them to be requirements to belong to the AAR. So going through why the AAR can do this, looking forward, currently you have the intermodal interchange rules that set operational standards for these railways. For railway cars, they have to make sure that they pass inspection based on the standards that you set, or else they cannot switch tracks with another rail carrier. And the reason this is so important is that they ultimately can't get to their final destination if they're not following those operational standards. So all we're asking you to do is add the cultural standards to this requirement so that they're doing the same things, making sure that they are going through and following your rules.
All right, so how they can actually implement this, we'll start really quickly with costs. For you, the AAR, it'll cost about $3.4 million, which breaks down into a price increase of your member dues of $530,000. That one total will cost railroads around $77 million a year, but when you put that in context of what East Palestine cost, that was $1.2 billion or greater. So it's really not that big of a number. Then, in terms of timeline, we're really focused on this idea of change management. We want to start by implementing these rules, working and creating memorandums of understanding, going throughout the process, and eventually continuing to evaluate safety culture. Now, the key takeaways from today, we would like you all, the AAR, to create culture standards to influence your people and your process, to create a full safety equation that will take a disaster in East Palestine that looks like this and make sure that railways operate and look like this, safe and efficient. Thank you. How close is that?
Okay, your one question will come from Mr. Jerry Zack.
specific policy changes that the industry can make directly in response to East Palestine, we would start off by really going back to that idea of stakeholders. Who are the key groups that we can work with? First, we would want to address the civilians and the people who are affected in the area. One opportunity there is to clean up the damage that was done in East Palestine or future problems like this that may occur in the industry. Two is to then work with first responders in the area. So how can we train them to better respond? Three, we would want to then work with the industry to create better standards moving forward. Four, we would then want to spend time talking with the actual railroad companies to create better culture. All right. Thank you all.